We are on to our last panel of the day, and you don't want to miss this one. It is going to be fantastic. We have a great group out there. I am so excited to introduce our moderator. She is a true soul sister. I absolutely love this woman. She runs a company called CannaContent. She is the best in the business. And not only that, she is such a wonderful person and someone that I absolutely love seeing at every conference. Stella Morrison.
Can we give it up for Lori, who has been doing this all day long? All right. Thank you for hanging for the last panel of the day, and I hope it is worth the wait. As Lori said, my name is Stella Morrison. I'm the founder of CannaContent. We're a award-winning woman-owned firm, a digital marketing firm specializing East Coast and emerging markets. I'm a New Jersey girl at heart, but I've adopted Cleveland as my new home, and it's a pleasure to always talk about my favorite subject, cannabis, in my new favorite, not going to say state, but cities. Panelists, come on up. I'd love to introduce you and get started. So today's topic, just like everything else in cannabis, how we deal with anything that you expect to be standard in other industries, inventory, cash flow, how these things relate, how your growth plan is going to relate to all of this. All of this looks a little different, and we have 4 folks with us today who are going to speak from experience about what they have seen, use their experience to kind of talk about patterns that have emerged and how you can utilize this in your operations as you're planning for or evaluating your inventory assortments, if you're a retailer, or just planning for growth. So I'm going to introduce everybody in alphabetical order. Just wave when I say your name so people know who you are. Jay Caplan is co-founder and principal of Tuross Group, a financial operations platform that serves cannabis operators and other regulated businesses across the U.S. Tuross handles the full financial stack, including accounting, cash management, inventory and cost accounting, and real-time financial dashboards. Jay works directly with cannabis operators on the financial architecture that determines whether they preserve cash, survive the 280E tax environment, and scale without outrunning their runway. Kate Oles is Vice President of Retail at Standard Wellness, where she leads retail operations across emerging and mature cannabis markets. She brings over 8 years of experience driving store-level performance with a focus on inventory discipline, pricing and promotional strategy, and operational efficiency across complex multi-state portfolios. Prior to Standard Wellness, Kate served as Executive Vice President of Revenue at Acreage Holdings, where she oversaw retail, wholesale, and strategic partnerships across multiple states. Scott Everett is General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Vext Science, where he brings extensive experience spanning law, business services, and cannabis-related operations to the table. He is the former General Counsel and VP of Business Services at Right Pat Credit Union, where he built an $800 million commercial loan portfolio and developed the first cannabis baking program in the state of Ohio. Terry? By deduction, Terry is last year. Terry Mendez is CEO of Safe Harbor Financial. He brings extensive experience in strategic planning and operational transformation within the information, technology, and cannabis industries. Prior to Safe Harbor, he was founder of Amos Advisory Services, where he successfully led turnaround efforts for single-state and multi-state cannabis operators. Before we start getting into everybody's niche, your experience, I want to set the stage about why this conversation has to happen in the first place. Why is inventory so tightly tied to growth strategy and cash preservation? Why is this an issue in cannabis specifically? Jay, want to take it first?
Sure. I think probably the easiest way to describe this is, inventory, whether you're a processor, manufacturer, cultivation, or retail, really is a cost to your business. And in many cases, building out the demand planning and strategy around that, you're paying for your inventory up front, and then you're waiting 60, 90, 120 days ultimately to get paid. So the big aspect of that is really staying on top of your inventory to manage your supply chain and your sales to match that. And you're not paying 60, 90 days in advance and then not having the revenue on the back end to be able to support that.
And briefly, why is that so different? Why is this different from other industries, other kind of retail operations? This is for anybody. Why is that? What makes that so different? Like, what are the exceptions we're making here?
Okay, so I mean that's a good question. I think the challenge here is matching your sales to your inventory and the planning around that. Most startups don't have an unlimited amount of resources or sometimes the experience to really be able to manage that. Middle management, they look at all these items. They're all great things to have, but nobody's really doing the kind of that demand planning and strategy around that to make sure that that cash flow is able to support it while you're waiting ultimately to get paid.
Yeah, I'd just add to that too. What's unique about this is we're in a really capital-starved industry, so the cost of your capital is exceptionally higher than you would compare to most consumer product goods.
Perfect. So with that in mind, I want to talk about actual inventory first, and then I kind of want to move into the capital side and talk more about the challenges there. So Kate, I want to speak to you directly because your hands are really in inventory day to day, managing the brand portfolio at Standard and the stores in the different states. What kind of impact does the right mix of inventory have on growth? What does that look like?
So, I mean, your inventory is cash sitting on the shelf. And when you come into a new market, obviously there's only so much data that you have access to, but you really have to learn what that market wants. It's not something where you can unilaterally purchase the same for every single location. So you've got to have a little bit more flexibility in your capital early on because you're probably going to be carrying a little bit more inventory. But as soon as that can get tight, as soon as you're to a place where you know what your market's looking for, when you shave a day on hand of inventory off, that's more cash that you then have in your pocket to be able to invest in other things. So when you get to that point, it's hugely important that you then are intentionally putting things on promotion, because are you actually driving traffic with a product, or are you simply subsidizing demand that was already there? And so the more inventory you have tied up, the less you're able to do other things that actually will drive your business. Yeah.
And to be clear, inventories, even if you have same dispensaries, same brands, same brand dispensary, you're going to have, the inventory is going to look different from place to place, which makes this even more complicated to manage. And on top of that, more expensive to figure out what's going to work at every dispensary. Would that be correct to assume?
For sure. And it only gets harder every day. So there's no time like the present to make sure that you have a strategy, you're executing on that strategy, and then you're pivoting as soon as you can to say, great, I know what I need here, and I'm not going to carry things just because I can. So they say growth, but really restraint is more important in my opinion.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Actually, I think that's fascinating to talk about. Is it just a matter of just because there's buzz around this brand, I shouldn't try to carry it? Is it about risk? Is it about calculated risk? What does that look like?
I mean, you've got to have the cash to pick it up, whatever it is. So you know what is selling, and there's going to be some inventory that you take a gamble on, you bring it on. But at the end of the day, it's not just one overarching days on hand of inventory. It's looking at it by category and saying, all right, if I'm going to pick something up, what am I going to take off the shelf? Because I don't just have an unlimited list of SKUs that I want to carry. I need that inventory to turn. And if it's not turning, then I'm not carrying it.
And we come back around to cash, which is going to be the theme of the next 22 minutes and 14 seconds. Does this look different if you are a vertically integrated operation and you have your own brands and you have to kind of decide and figure out how much you're going to carry of your own product versus a different brand? Scott, I'm looking. Well,
it does look different. So I ran Nature's Medicine. It was a 7-state, multi-state operator. We had 52 dispensaries. I'm not there anymore. But I'll tell you, it matters a lot. When you're vertically integrated and you're carrying 80–90% of your own stuff on your shelves, you become like the white label brand that you can get at CVS or Walgreens or whatnot, as opposed to having a diversity of product, whether it's your brand, which is giving you the maximized profit, but if it's not turning, it's still an issue on your shelf. And so making sure that you have something more like 50–60% of vertical integrated product versus 40% of third-party product, and there's a real reason to have it shelf space in any other CPG market, cannabis included, is real estate, right? It's about the right inventory at the right time, at the right price for the right customer, and every dispensary that you have has a different customer base. I can't sell, New Mexico was one of our markets, I can't sell certain things in Rio Rancho that I can sell in Albuquerque or I can sell in Las Cruces. And so knowing the schematic of your ideal customer for every single dispensary and leaning into that is more important than making sure that your vertical integrated product is represented in each dispensary. I don't really look at this as like the McDonald's thought. Wherever, you go to McDonald's in New York, you're going to get the same McDonald's experience in Ohio, you're going to get the same McDonald's experience in Denver. While you can do that, it is harder to replicate because every dispensary, again, has its own kind of reason for being.
Yeah. Scott, I saw you moving the mic.
Well, so I just had a couple thoughts to that. I think what it gives you, playing on what Kate said, is you manage a scarce set of SKUs. You want to cover 5 key categories, and what I think vertical integration gives you, if you do it correctly, is it gives you category coverage. It doesn't substitute for the need for clear discipline on managing inventory. We manage inventory on a sell-through basis to demand forecasting, so you're in your files every day looking at what goes through, and yes, there's some variety from store to store. But for Vext, I think vertical integration starts with you don't go into a new market unless you can control the door. And the back end of that is really, yes, to some degree, it's a little bit of margin protection, but it's more category coverage so that you don't let that customer leave without a product. The thing I would touch on what Terry said is, no, you don't want to sell everybody Budweiser, but at least my limited experience here on the retail side is they are looking, their measure of quality right now is THC content, and their second major value driver is price. And so if you're vertically integrated and running discipline, then you can feed those two needs.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one other point to that, and the vertically integrated guys have a lot of flexibility depending upon what 280E is ultimately going to come out from the federal government. But for the vertically integrated, you could put the profit back into the manufacturing. A standalone retailer really struggles from a 280E and a tax perspective, so having that vertical integration gives you a lot more flexibility to ultimately minimize your tax bill.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to growth, Kate, this might be for you, but I would love if you have like an illustration for people of a time where you maybe made a change in an inventory mix and you saw a really big improvement, or just to give people like a real world example of like how this works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to have a plan and then be able to execute that plan. And I think that Jay said it best, like being vertically integrated gives you flexibility. But that doesn't just mean that like you can throw anything at the wall. It's this is what we're going to try and accomplish, and let's see if this works or does not work, and what are we going to learn from it if it doesn't. So I think, some companies may be prioritizing, like, I need to send all of my inventory to retail because I want to maximize margin, whereas other companies may say, hey, I really want to see that wholesale revenue, and I know that retail can go find inventory elsewhere. And so maybe I'm going to sell more on the wholesale market. I'm not going to target as much of a high share in my own stores because I want to make sure that I have a greater share of the state sales overall rather than being in a few concentrated areas. So I think it really comes down to just having a plan, executing against that plan, and then learning from it so that you make a better plan next time.
Great. And I want to move on to start talking about like the growth end of things. And for the folks who are really involved in the financial side, do you see a line between when, what's the line between investing in growth and you're starting to overextend your position, right? Like, not all, is growth always going to be good, right? Is there going to be like a right time and place? Is there such a thing as a right time and place, right? Are there any like universal or nearly universal like signs or any sort of like indicators that you've seen over your years on the financial side that kind of say, hey, like, you should maybe slow down a little bit, or, oh, this is a good time to grow? Have you seen anything like that? I'd love to share that with folks.
Yeah, so look, when you're investing in growth, you have to measure your payback period and your return on investment and understand how to kind of design that correctly. When you are, this is not WeWorks, right? This is not that industry. This isn't a software kind of situation where you're going after subscribers and you can do what Amazon did and lose money for the first 25 years and, still somehow become an Amazon. This is just not that industry. If the payback period isn't short enough, the cost of capital is so expensive that you don't want to actually go after that way. I've seen people make giant mistakes, buying 50 Mobius machines on the hopes of growth, or a giant MockTech machine that can do 10,000 joints a minute, whatever it may be. If you don't have the ability to leverage that capacity, then you're just throwing money away that could otherwise be deployed in the kind of protection side of the business. there is that J curve. You guys are going to have a giant experience of, hey, this is wonderful, and then prices start coming down. And if you spent on all this wonderful equipment, when prices come down, you have to be able to replace that equipment eventually. That's the whole sense of depreciation. 5, 10 years of running that machine, you need to replace it, prices are down, how do you do it, right? So you need to build that reserve. And so chasing growth that you can actually realize and then cutting the cord if you don't see the realization is something that you have to be disciplined in.
Go ahead.
Well, I get the opportunity to watch our company because we're here in Ohio where things are going great. As I say, this is money-making time. I think that's what you're alluding to, Terry. But I also get to watch Arizona. It's not money-making time in Arizona right now. And you asked about red lines. One thing that I've tried to counsel is it's one, everybody wants margin protection on the retail side, right? I mean, that's done in a lot of different industries, grocery, all that stuff. Okay, well, when you stack that on consignment, then you really are consuming your cash and you are not confronting the fact that you are no longer in a growth market. And I think that's where one of the lines is to watch in a place like Ohio, because you start to see those asks come through. We were talking in the back about, essentially funding your clients' receivables, and you get in that trap. So,
To follow up on something you said, is it safe to say that every state's going to have this money-making time, not money-making time, and we're just in a nice golden age right now? Would you say that? Or is it just, you've seen things in other places? I mean,
I think Kate's probably seen more than most of us up here. I mean, from my 2 cents, I would say, yes, Ohio is fairly unique, so people can come up and argue the uniqueness, but I defer to Kate because she's seen a lot.
I mean, I don't know that every state has a money-making time. I think some states may be more attractive than others. The reality is every state is going to mature eventually. How long the money-making time period may vary, but you're going to get to a place where it is harder, and the concept of like, if you build it, they will come isn't reality forever.
thank you.
So you've got to be smart, and like, this may seem like a great plan today, but 2 years from now, is this still a great plan? Is this still scale that I'm going to need? Because like I said before, like, today is as easy as it's ever going to be. It will be harder tomorrow.
Yep. This is why I preach the importance of brand, because it's not going to, you're not going to, you're going to have, if you build it, they will come. We're so past that. It's as an industry, and we can't rely on that. Jay, I think I saw half a hand up.
Yeah, I think to add to what you just said, you have this excitement in these new states, but it's really basic economics. It's supply and demand, right? And so the pendulum kind of switches back and forth. But in most cases, year 2, year 3 of legalized cannabis in whatever state, that supply tends to increase over the demand. And then you got the overtaxation, and then you got the hemp and the black market that takes up huge market shares, regardless of where you are in the country. But it's just this pendulum that kind of continues in every single state around the country.
And I was just going to say, like, I think the thing that everyone can learn from this is, like, you've got to be proactive. Like, the pendulum is going to swing the opposite way. And even if your brand is at the top of the mountain, if you just let it sit there and you're not continuing to do things to keep that brand alive, like, someone is going to come to take a piece of your pie, and you've got to be ready for that and have a plan when it does get harder.
This leads beautifully into my next question about cash reserves. Are there any golden rules or any golden rules that you've seen about how operators, license holders should build and maintain their cash reserves? Does it look different? And does it look different from other industries, which I'm just going to go ahead and say yes, but you're going to tell me why.
So maybe I'll start. When I go through these situations, which is never the case, but I try to have at least 3 to 4 months worth of operating capital, in a reserve account. What I also try to do with our clients is to build an impound or, a reserve account for their tax bill and allocate that on a monthly basis. There's so many things that can happen, and there's so many variables in this space. I mean, these are great things to have, but in practicality, most operators are living, I call it paycheck to paycheck. So it's great to have 3 to 6 months worth of cash reserves, but most of the small and mid-sized operators, they're not even close to that.
There's only so many lattes you can skip in order to keep that going, I feel like.
Exactly.
Look, in this industry, you need to understand that days of sales outstanding isn't the metric. right? Your AR turnover, your AP, and are you paying people 30, 60, 90 days? You got to look at the entire cash conversion cycle. All of the operators that operate cash flow positively are looking at it and saying, the day I put that clone in the ground or a pot, the day I plant a seed is the first moment of inventory. That inventory builds through the cultivation cycle, and it's not until I get paid that cycle's over. In states like Michigan, that could be 12 months to a year and a half before you see that dollar come back. Remember, it takes 6 months to grow it, right? So if you're in cultivation and you're selling wholesale and they need to sell it before they can pay you, you've got to add that timeline in there. And as you add that time and you look at that, you're trying to fund operations at the same time. So having a revolving credit facility or some ability to close that gap is really important. And moving everyone to COD, like we said earlier, isn't always the answer. It's the answer to get your cash faster, but it's not the answer to maximize your sales and expand your customer base, again, if you're a wholesaler. So it depends on your situation. Inventory means different things to different people, right? Inventory for a dispensary is defined differently than an extraction facility and a cultivator, and it could be all of the above if you're vertically integrated.
And is any of this connected to just the nature of cannabis products in the first place? You have to grow something, you have to cure it, you have to then package it, process it, get it tested, wait for the lab test results to come back. Does that complicate any of these like windows and time frames?
It just makes it longer.
I think retail is a little more typical. Like retail is faster. If you need cash, like retail is the place where you're going to obviously turn that inventory over more quickly. But I think just like anything, there's going to be some companies who are really great at planning and having a plan and having cash reserves. And then there's going to be some operators that don't. And if you're in the market, you're going to find out who the companies are that aren't good about it. And you're going to be very disciplined in tracking their AR moving forward. But it's a mixed bag. You certainly see all of it.
Are there other ways to tap into value that aren't literally like cash on hand, which is of course important, but as Jay mentioned, there's struggles with it. Like for example, like is it worth personnel came up a lot today as something that's like super valuable. You have that like cannabis knowledge in, like can you factor that in as part of like a typical way to sort of push forward your growth trajectory?
I'll start. I don't want to hog the mic, but I'll say this. A good GM is worth their weight in gold. They are absolutely going to be the ones who take the directives that this is like what we're going to do, and they make it reality for their teams. And I'm sure it's the same in a production facility, that like your good managers that stay on top of it, who they are. Like not every manager is a great manager, and I think that's typical in all industries. But when you have a good one, obviously you get to watch their career growth as they develop, and even like I've seen some people here today that I've had the pleasure of working with and watch their own career development. So I mean, when you find a good human, take care of them and watch them flourish.
Amen.
I think bud tenders are huge. I think if you're running vertical and you don't have a good bud tender group that can educate the customer and make sure, again, if they show up for something, you don't want them to leave without some sort of sale. So I think that's huge. And the other thing in a growth industry like this, we all get excited, everybody's going to get rich. It's hard to find people that are operationally disciplined. So from the cultivation side, a quick example I give you is the immediate thing is we don't have enough supply. So let's go out and blow out 3 more rooms in this building and spend a couple $1 million. We had a group that studied under canopy lighting in Arizona, and it exceeded expectations by leaps and bounds. So you made no CapEx investment other than some additional lights, and you saved yourself a ton of cash by doing that. So you can kind of stay in the breach and make money while it's in front of you without getting overextended. So, that kind of talent is huge to this issue.
And just to follow up on that, I don't want people to hear that and say, oh, I should try that kind of under canopy lighting and I'll save money. Yeah. I want people to hear here that thinking through these decisions and can we achieve the same effects but maybe in a more cost efficient way is the opportunity here.
Another way to say it is, are you funding your investment from cash flow from operations? That's a number one question I think you start with. Or are you funding it from your balance sheet? If you're funding it from your balance sheet, it's dilutive. You're taking risk.
Yeah. Yeah, Jen, this came up in the prep call, I think, Jay, we were talking about
Yeah,
this.
I mean, that's very important. But I guess to finish on the human capital side, I mean, having good people is so important. You know, when this industry started, you hired people that you trusted because there was so much cash. Right now with banking and some of the other things, it's getting the right person in the right seat. But, you know, like you said, I mean, having a good GM is important. You know, training and treating your bud tenders, I mean, they have the most valuable information. Spending 20 minutes talking to them, you get so much information out of them. You know, in talking about, you know, like what you just said, by the way, I will say the under canopy lights probably get you about a 20% higher yield. So they do work, right? Regardless of the human capital piece. I don't know if that's a secret.
Well, now it's out. Come back to another Ignite It. Get more secrets.
I'll just share, if you mind, if you don't mind, I'll
Yeah,
share.
quickly, because we're running out of time. Yep.
Make sure you take a look at the marketplace in total. Having good people doesn't mean always that you have to own those people. There are shared services out there. There are economies of scale that you can leverage in order to still be profitable and get to the desired outcome that you want. You know, you're an owner. So you're not necessarily the best bookkeeper, the best financial planner, the best retail salesperson, the best grower, the best extractor, the best at everything. So find those things that you're awesome at, lean into those things, and those things that you're not awesome at, give it to someone else to do that might be doing it for 10 or 15 other people, and you get to leverage the economies of scale of that situation.
We only have a few minutes left, so I'm only going to take this like 3 minutes on the last conversation piece I have, which is I think we can't, it's hard to have this conversation without addressing issues with cash flow and late payments. So I wanted to hear from you about, you know, how that's felt at every level of the company. Like, how should companies like best plan for like meeting these obligations without impacting, you know, the entire health of, you know, the business when and if these things do come up? Like, what are some strategies that you would recommend, or are there things that you should do or do not do, like anything like that?
So I'll go first if you don't mind. Late payments is a major issue in this industry. You need to be transparent with your vendors, specifically when you think you're going to pay them, because they're making an investment in you during this period of time. And vendors are expecting it. When you leave people kind of hanging, that's when you get forced into receivership, or the vendor starts howling at you, you're losing relationships. And we have an interesting industry where oftentimes your salespeople are also your collection agents, right? And that prohibits sales, right? Hey, by the way, I want the next sale, but you owe me 100 grand. Can you give me the 100 grand tomorrow so I can give you the next sale? It's difficult situations, segregating those situations out, understanding the 13-week and 52-week cash flows and inflows, sharing that with the vendor team and ranking them. For A, B, C, D, A, someone I have to pay right away, like your employees and maybe the federal government, maybe not, right? You know, all the way down to D, that person can wait because it's not necessarily critical to my particular business and running my operation. But each one of those categories not only should be rated, there should be a communication strategy attached to them.
Great. Any follow-up here from anyone?
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is, you know, building your cash flow and your projections horizontally versus vertically, right? And staying on top of that. I'm not a big fan of having salespeople do accounts receivable. That creates a conflict of interest. But the big thing is being able to track that. I call it after 30 days, you got to put the caution sign up. After 60 days, the chance of these guys getting caught up is slim to close to zero, right? And really staying on top of that. Accounts receivable doesn't work as a hobby. Staying on top of it is really important, and then also integrating that back into your cash flow projections. So, and most operators have that data in there, so you know that these dispensaries or these groups that your vendors, you know their pay history and build that in. So you build that in your cash flow projections, so you have a pretty good idea of when those payments are coming in.
So it's really important that you know when you're extending credit to somebody, right? Having everyone on COD is one thing, it's limiting to your sales, but how much credit should you extend? 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand? And what can that person reasonably expect? And do they need to sell your inventory in order to pay you, right? How much time is that going to take? And what is your cost of capital? If you're paying 15, 16% interest, am I eating away at my profits by waiting 3-4 months to get paid? And should I have that sale? It's wonderful to say I made a 50 grand or 100 grand sale, but you might actually be losing money on that sale if it takes them 9 months to pay you. So you got to be very selective in that process and have that kind of self-discipline built in. And again, there are wonderful companies that do these things that you guys should, think about leveraging.
With our last minute literally here, I just want to give everyone some final thoughts. If there's one piece of advice from your experience that you would want folks in the room to take away today, what is that piece of advice? Scott, we'll start with you.
I would say ask a lot of questions, even if this is not an interesting topic to you, because it's probably key to your survival over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think the second thing is you don't need a huge staff anymore to get into the stuff these guys have touched on. You can use chat, the analytical skills that are out there to model out your sell-through, to model out your demand forecasting and stuff. If you just embrace that, it can get you some value back.
Okay, quickly, what I would say is manage your cash flow weekly.
Nice and quick.
Have a wonderful cash reserve. You guys are doing wonderful here in Ohio. Make sure you're saving, I think, 6 to 9 months of cash. Get a revolving credit facility in place. So it's there when you don't need it, and when you need it, you have it available to you.
If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, and it'll get harder tomorrow.
We are literally at the 0-minute mark. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We will see you at the happy hour.
All right. Thank you to our last panel. You guys were amazing. And thank you to all of you for sticking it out through the last one.